33 Cheyenne.
The past couple of weeks have been very surprising in the legal arena, both locally and nationally. We're going to talk about that on this week's Report to Wyoming. Please join us.
If you're looking for a truly unique spot, a place that will introduce new ideas and experiences, a peaceful place to enjoy a few quiet moments, somewhere you can learn to cook a delightful new dish, look no further. The Herbadashery is your oasis in Wyoming. Fill your senses with fresh herbs as you stroll through the greenhouse. Let Herbadashery Catering bring out the flavor of your event. Combine your hobbies by taking a cooking, gardening, or crafting class. Envision the endless possibilities. The Herbadashery.
Hello and welcome to Report to Wyoming. I'm Casey Smith. As I said in the open, it's been quite an interesting era of American politics and American judicial system, and I'm not so sure the two are absolutely separated. So we're going to talk about that today. Of course, joining me in the studio once again, Dallas Laird, Frank Chapman, our two legal experts, analysts, what have you. Let's start locally, and this is a case that, Dallas, you have been heavily involved in. We had a former Wyoming Highway Patrolman accused by a present female Casper police officer of sexual assault, rape. There was the trial was supposed to start Monday. It ended abruptly, much to, I think, almost everyone's surprise, except I suppose yours. Tell us about that a little bit.
Well, the 3 sexual assault charges were dismissed, and Mr. Ward entered no contest pleas to the charges. You know, it's a case, it's a serious case. You know, lawyers get cases where they actually have people's lives in their hands. You know, it's like being in a burning building and you have a little baby and you're trying to save the little baby. And if you go out this one door, you might get burned on the arm, but if you go out these other doors, you might get burned to death. You know, which door do most people generally want to take? And so what happened in Brad's case, Brad's a good man. He served the highway patrol and the people of the state of Wyoming for 22 years. His dad was a highway patrolman for 28 years, and he died during his time, and Brad took his position. Brad had his dad's badge, and you know, it's a sad end to an era. There's been a ward on the highway patrol for 50 years, and now I think it's a time for healing and for people to get on with their lives, and from that standpoint, I think that's the way Brad looked at it. His brother, who's a colonel in the Army, came from Saudi Arabia, and his mother lives here. Very, very wonderful people. And Brad just decided it was time to end it and put it all behind him and have a healing for all the people involved.
Interesting case, because we're dealing with 2 law enforcement officers, 2 different stories, obviously. It had the makings of, pardon the expression, gentlemen, the O.J. Simpson trial of Wyoming, and then suddenly it ends, and in speaking with both you and the district attorney, Kevin Meenan, neither one of you were sure you were either going to win or lose, and so I'm wondering,
well, Casey,
were there any winners?
Anytime there's a criminal trial, it's a crapshoot. There's no guarantees at all in the criminal law. The only guarantee is that the prosecution and the court are going to have the first say and the last say, and of course that's a tough thing to do. You know, when we started these programs several months ago now, Dallas told us that he never represented a guilty defendant, and I think he can still hold that true here. This was a no contest plea, which meant that the state and the court permitted Mr. Ward to enter a plea where he did not have to admit any guilt, but he agreed to not go to trial. He's now a law enforcement officer who's been convicted of a felony, and of course that's a death knell to any law enforcement career. And this nolo contendere plea is the same thing that, interestingly enough, was used 30 years ago by Spyro Agnew,
our former vice president.
That's right.
This is a situation where someone pleads no contest. They choose not to contest the charges against them, as amended in this instance, and the court, if they accept the no contest plea, goes ahead and finds the person guilty as if they'd pled guilty because they've chosen not to contest the plea.
Well, in this case, though, Frank, there is the added thing that I think people have forgotten. he entered a no contest plea and was treated under the first offender status. So on the major charge at the end of the probation period, the whole charge is dismissed and as though it's never existed and won't be on his record. One of the things, and I think Frank understands this as well as any other defense lawyer in the United States, innocent people do get convicted and are sentenced to the penitentiary. And you see it all the time in sex cases. If some person is charged with that and the jury decides to believe the accuser as opposed to the individual who's charged, the individual who's charged can go to jail. And usually on first-degree rape cases in Wyoming, the average sentence is somewhere between 10 and 25 years. So the risk is so heavy. And all it boils down to, you know, the truth of it is a person's fate rests in the jury's understanding and interpretation of 3 words: beyond reasonable doubt.
Right,
if they hear the testimony and this collective 12-person jury decides they haven't proved the case beyond a reasonable doubt, the man goes free. If they say, well, it was beyond reasonable doubt, the person can go to jail for 20 or 25 years. And there's so many instances, and I just ask the public, how many times have any of you folks ever been accused of something you didn't do and you couldn't explain your way out of it, and the more you explained it, the worse it got, no matter what it was? And then have you ever asked yourself, why did that person say those things about me, and you could never find out? Those are questions I think every citizen in Wyoming should ask themselves, especially if they're on a jury.
Well, I think it's important to know that law enforcement agents will be treated the same as anyone else when it comes to being charged with and dealt with when they're accused of crimes. That's the first thing. The second thing, and I have to say this, alcohol is involved in probably 90% of the crimes in Wyoming.
I'd agree.
And I think it was involved in both the victim and the accused in this Brad Worth case. They were at a party. I think there was alcohol involved, and but for that alcohol, we wouldn't be talking about Brad Ward. We'd be talking about the fact that the state of Wyoming hasn't joined in the tobacco litigation. I think that's something that we ought to be
that's
getting
another
into.
situation. We may get on to that in a minute.
Casey, let me say one thing. You know, the truth is Brad Ward, the state went after Brad Ward in this case with a vengeance. I have never seen a prosecution this serious where witnesses wouldn't talk to me about it when I attempted to investigate it, where my process was being thwarted for being served.
By who?
Just different people. And it was one of these things where it was a major league heavyweight fight.
Well, this is what happens all the time when you only represent innocent people. I represent people whether they're innocent or not, as long as they can afford to hire me. And it happens all the time.
Well, and you know, and I appreciate that. I've been in situations, this is the first criminal case I've taken in several years, and I'm just not used to being in a situation where evidence seems to get lost, where it comes in a day or two before trial, where you get rulings in the court that just seems to thwart your ability to prove.
It happens all the time, and it happens in every court.
Okay, one would think, though, I mean, we're talking about two law enforcement agencies. You would think that the evidence, all of the ducks would be in a row immediately, and yet you say it's the worst one you've
well, it's the worst one I've been in. But you know, it's like the Navy versus the Army. You know how they talk about each other. You have the Highway Patrol and the police department here. And the truth is, all of these folks are in law enforcement. They're sworn to uphold the law, do their duty, and I think that they did do their duty in this case. I think everybody thought that they were doing their duty, but the truth is Mr. Meenan prosecuted this person as though he had no badge. He went after him just like he would go after anybody else.
And rightfully he should have.
That's his job.
Exactly. But there are people out there who will say, well, Mr. Ward had a badge, so he got easy treatment. He had a great lawyer, he got easy treatment. You know, the truth is that justice sometimes gets done in the courtroom. And in this particular case, what you have to weigh is the very extreme, terrible, harsh consequences if someone makes a decision against him as opposed to a plea bargain that he can live with.
Well, I hope for his sake and for the community's sake that he can live up to the terms of his prohibition and stay away from the bottle.
Well, you know, I think Brad Ward is a good man, and I think he understands life, and I think that he's got a great family, and it's a tragic situation all the way around, and I think that a healing is occurring, and a healing that may even be occurring within our judicial system locally, because I think a lot of people have watched this, and they know how difficult these kind of cases are, where it's a he said, she said situation. And you know, it is scary thinking that somebody, Casey, could come up and decide to say something about you, and you could find yourself in a position where now you're in the judicial system, and you find out how expensive it is to be in the judicial system. And you know, everybody in this has spent many, many sleepless nights worrying and wondering, you know, what is the real truth here? And you know, unfortunately,
will we ever know?
Without a trial, no one will ever know.
And that's the point. I've heard, you know, talking to you, talking to Kevin, and there's plenty of things that we as reporters get off the record, innuendo. You hear these things on and on and on. And then I go out in the community, and I ask people, what do you think of this? And then I just listen. And because of the publicity, and because of the, I'll call it, untimely release of the alleged offender's name, and we're going to get on the Paula Jones case in a second here, but because of the status and the nature of the crime, will Mr. Ward ever be able to, for lack of a better term, hold his head up in the community again?
Well, I think that he will be. You know, I think people in Wyoming, I think people everywhere are forgiving. And I think once a person proves themselves, I mean, look, we were in a major war with the Japanese. Now we all drive their cars, buy their stuff. They killed all of our people. We killed all of their people. But now there's been a healing. And I think that's a very important spiritual principle, is forgiveness by everybody. Because if you don't have forgiveness, you can't heal.
And you know, Brad Ward isn't the only problem that the Highway Patrol has. They have an officer that's now suing them for sexual discrimination. They have another suit going on. Threatened by a woman who claims that Brad Ward did some of the similar stuff to her up in Cody. So the Highway Patrol's problems aren't all going to go away because Brad Ward's case is gone now.